Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
Death is an enemy. How do you tell your children about death? Now we know that death, even though it's an enemy, it's a defeated enemy because Christ conquered death at the cross. But still, it's a difficult thing to talk about with your children. I was talking with my son the other day who reminded me that one of our friends, back when they were all children, used to edit the Disney movies. And my kids, when these particular movies came out, they had seen them at the show already. But when they came out on video, she edited out the scene where Mufasa died in The Lion King. And when the Sea Witch got killed by the ship, she edited that part out of the movie too. So you knew when you were borrowing the movies, her Disney movies, you knew that any scenes that had anything to do with death were going to be cut out. And when she got diagnosed with breast cancer, she did not tell her son. She did not want them to be frightened about her dying. And she told us not to say anything to them either. Well, now, of course, her sons are grown. I don't know if she ever told them she was dealing with that. And she's grandmother age. So, you know, they're in college and older. But I have to say this thing that happened that really bothered me. 1 year for my birthday, Lavinia, my older sister, got us tickets to see Oprah.
Your older daughter.
Yes. My guest, her guest that day was Rosie O'Donnell. And I have always loved Rosie O'Donnell, and she was just hilarious. But during the break, she shared this intimate story, and this was not aired, by the way. She shared this story about when she was 10, how her mom died. And none of the adults would tell her or her brothers and sisters that her mom had died. They said, oh, she's gone away. And they wouldn't let the kids go to the funeral or any of the aftermath of it. And she said, you know, she'd hear a noise in the middle of the night and would think, oh, my mom's back. She would get up and run to the window or the living room and she wasn't there. She said that incident traumatized her for many, many years. They wouldn't tell the kids their mom had died. Now, around the holidays, our daddy, he would pray the shortest prayer in the Bible when we were saying the blessing over the food. He would always say, Jesus wept. And I really didn't know where that came from until I was way older, when I read the story about when Jesus's close friend Lazarus died. And when he arrived on the scene, Lazarus had been dead 4 days. And Mary and Martha said, you know, if you'd have been here, he wouldn't have died. And then he explained to them that he was the resurrection and the life. Did they believe that? And they said, yeah, we know on the last day there'll be a resurrection. But then he said, move away the stone. And right before he did all that, Jesus wept. Now, Jesus knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knew he was going to bring him back to life. Why was he so upset? Why did he cry? Because at that moment, the God-man felt that emotion, that feeling that death does to a person. And I remember times when my kids were younger, you know, there were different times where they actually had to deal with death when their pets died. In fact, when John's hedgehog died, I cried. You know, the bigger the pet is, the more devastating the incident is. And we buried him. We had a little animal funeral, said to the kids, oh, they went to animal heaven, you know, every time they had a pet that died, like a pet turtle or, you know, I think their rabbit was given away to somebody before it died. So I didn't have to deal with a bigger pet yet. But when we talk about death with our children, I think being raised in a Christ-centered home, gave us the opportunity to explain death from a biblical perspective, that while it is painful and awful and sometimes devastating, that because we believe in the resurrection, all of these people who have believed in Jesus, they will be alive again. They'll have a new life. But it doesn't negate the fact that death really has a devastating effect. Yes. And it's hard to explain it sometimes to your children. How do you guys deal with death and talking about death with your own young children?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say young children, because when I first married my husband, Sultan, and he had many, many uncles, aunts, because he had a very big family, and there are a lot of older relatives that he had. So it would seem like every month or every few months, someone was dying. And Zakia was very young, maybe, I think she was maybe like 2 years old when our grandmother died, our father's mother died. So she got introduced to funerals very early. And then with my husband's family, that became our family outing, going to a funeral every few months. But the good thing was that we got a chance to meet all the relatives. Now, of course, we followed the Muslim way of life, belief system, and all of that. And so our teaching about death is totally different. Death is not an enemy. Death is not a bad thing. Life on earth is more like a temporary job assignment. You come from God, you have your stint on earth to learn your lessons, and then you return to God. So our saying when someone dies is, from God we come, to God we return. So there is no sadness in terms of mourning or grief or belief or wonder if a person's going to heaven or hell or any of that, because we understand that life here on earth is a temporary experience, but your regular place of residence is with God. So there isn't the same idea of, oh no, they died. It's like, and where else are you going? I mean, you knew this life was temporary when you chose to enter it as an infant. So our whole belief system about life and death is different. We do not believe that you have to earn eternal life. We teach that you are an eternal being having a temporary physical experience, but you were already eternal when you were born into this temporary physical life. So when Zakia would go to these various funerals at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, it wasn't a scary thing. We never said anything like, oh, they're just asleep. So a child be thinking somebody's in a coffin under the ground. You know, that's terrifying. So we let her know and helped her understand the spirit of life that the person is still living. Their body is lying here in the casket. This is the home they used to live in while they were here, but they are gone. So we celebrate their life and we acknowledge their life, but they're not in there. They're not in that body. They're not in that casket. Now, it was challenging for her at the age of, I believe she was 8 or 9 when our father passed away in the year 2000. So yeah, she would have been 10. Yeah, she was 10 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was very close with her grandfather, you know. I mean, she was very close with Daddy. I mean, he picked her up from school ever since she was in like preschool. They had a little ritual, you know, they would go and get McDonald's. You know, McDonald's always had all the little toys and everything from all the movies. So she had every single toy because they'd always give her the kids' meal. I mean, they had their daily routine, you know. And so she was very close to him. And she was with us in the hospital as he was taking his last breaths. And I remember her saying, you know, I just feel like I want to call 1-800-GOD, you know, because I know it was really hard for her realizing he was passing away. But she was able to get through that. And then during her freshman year, you know, my husband had been diagnosed with cancer the year before, but he was able to kind of hold out to see her high school graduation. But he was rapidly getting worse, losing a lot of weight. And so after she entered the campus, we had a couple of weekends where he went into the hospital and he would say, well, tell Zakia, to come back and see me. I need to say goodbye. And that happened a couple of times. And the final time, the weekend that he passed away, which was October 21st, 2007, I had to call her that Friday and tell her, I think this is going to be your father's last. So you need to come and spend the weekend. And she did. And she was there after he took his last breath. I was in the bed with him, holding his hand, and he had stopped breathing, and finally his heart stopped. I felt his pulse slow to a stop. So she was there during that whole process. And I know it was, Zakia doesn't really, she's not a emotionally just demonstrative person. And she didn't let tears out until the funeral, and her and her older brother and sisters, Now, this was one event that it was a little bit difficult for her probably to deal with my calmness. But he and I people don't know, we talked about it a lot during those last months of his life. He would make jokes about it, how his ghost was going to come back on my wedding night, and he'd be standing in the doorway, and my husband would look up and see him go, ah, and he'd go, oh, excuse me, brother. We laughed about that stuff, So we had accepted the fact that he was making a transition. And I was like, look, when you get there, you got to come back and tell me how it is. For real, because, I don't want to live by faith. I want to know. So you figure out how to come back and tell me. And so, we had a whole relationship that we had built. And so I was emotionally ready for the transition. A lot of people were not ready for my response because I was, they expected the old shattered widow, And so I think it was a little difficult for her seeing that I was calm, seeing that Thursday before he kind of lost his speech, we went over his funeral program, who all was supposed to speak and everything. And he picked out the picture that was supposed to go on the program. Yeah. So we had planned the whole thing and got the person who was going to do the eulogy. So he planned his funeral before his funeral. So I was at peace. I think it was hard for her because, how do you express grief with someone who isn't appearing to grieve? And she said to me, you're acting like this is one of y'all's projects. Because, we designed and did, newspapers, magazines, and stuff. So I'm like, oh, look at the layout of the funeral program. He's still in the bedroom breathing, and I'm showing her the funeral program, and she was just like, how are you doing this like this, But that was how I was able to handle it because we had handled it before. So I think that probably was more difficult for her, even as an older child, in college, than probably even her grandfather, which was also difficult. But in terms of how we dealt with death and the description of what happens and the fact that, you're returning to God and all the other, relatives that are on the other side. So it's not a sad thing. It's not an enemy. It's not, oh, you did something wrong. Oh, you're going to be punished. Oh, when you go to heaven or hell. It's none of that. Our belief system was none of that. It was total celebration of the life of the person, and they are enjoying life even more than you are where they're at. So, but I think it was difficult for her simply because, as you say, death is always difficult. It is because you have the absence of the person.
Okay, let me tell you some of my death stories.
Your death stories.
For one thing, I think our children, because we're talking about how to talk to your children about death, our children grasp that a lot faster than we think.
They do.
We believe that if they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, that they don't understand. And I'll tell you a couple of stories and you're going to laugh at me, but I deserve this. When Sarah got her first fish, we were trying to get her a fish so she would get out of my bed. But that didn't work. But anyway, we got her first fish, and she was about, I want to say she was about 4. So yeah, y'all can talk about me, about this child still sleeping in the bed with me at 4. But that's a story for another day. But she got her first fish at 4. After, maybe a week or so, the fish died. And I did not want to tell her that her fish had died. Her fish's name was Nala.
Nala.
So I said,
Oh,
you know what? I think Nala is just sleeping. I think she just needs to rest. So
Okay.
Sarah goes to preschool. I go out, find an identical fish, come back,
Oh.
put that fish in there and say, see, Nala's feeling better. Nala too didn't last very long.
Ooh.
But listen to this. So she comes out and she says, oh, look, Nala died again.
So you had not really.
Sarah was
Not, you're not her at all.
and listen, no, and she was 4. So I stopped trying to fool her when she was 4. I haven't been able to fool her since. So I couldn't do it then.
Resurrection.
Yeah, resurrection. We have the resurrection and the light. But she just says, look, Nala died again. So I says, okay, she got it the first time. You shouldn't have told her she was resting. Then there was the bird thing. See, I've had birds for, probably 35 years. I've had birds longer than I've had husbands and daughters. So I had this bird that died. And I don't even remember doing this. So this is how foolish I am. But I told Sarah that the bird went to birdie heaven. Then she saw me wrap it up and throw it in the garbage.
Oh no!
She tells me that one. I don't remember that one. But
y'all should have gave it a funeral.
Yeah.
I have asphalt in my backyard.
Oh, well.
I wrapped it up and threw it in the garbage. It was all, the soul was already gone. So that was the
You don't have any grass in the front yard?
No, I don't have a front yard. You've been to my house. I live in Boston.
Oh.
I have a sidewalk. So that's
Surely there was a park or something.
No, you don't go digging up in any parks. It was a bird. I wrapped it up in trash in the newspaper and threw it in the garbage. I have had birds for so long, that I'm not digging up asphalt to put a bird under it. So, that's where all the extra husbands are. So anyway, but my whole point is that don't try to fool kids. Now, Sarah had her great uncle, my father-in-law's brother died when she was about, I'll say she was about 3, no, close to 4. So around this same time. And we went to the funeral and there was a nun there because they were Catholic. And there was a nun there who was talking to the little kids saying, oh, he's like asleep. And I want to smack that woman in the face because I explained to her later, I explained to Sarah later, no, he is not sleeping. Because if you tell children that someone is sleeping, they will be afraid to go to sleep.
Yes.
And I explained that to her, that he's passed on, he went to heaven, whatever, but whatever your belief system is, or if you believe that this is the only place, whatever, but you explain your belief system to your child and don't give them fears that going to sleep or that prayer, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I die or I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to keep.
Think about that prayer, because we all said it.
We all say that. I don't know if we really understood the words of it because I never had any thought about my soul being taken while I was asleep. I just never thought that.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was such a rote thing that we didn't think about it. But now when kids are more, I think they're more discerning and they start listening to what they're saying. And then they say, well, I don't want my soul to go anywhere while I'm sleeping.
maybe I just stay awake.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't traumatized by the prayer, but like you said, it was the thing you said unthinkingly, because
it's like saying God is great, God is good. Let us thank Him for our food.
Amen. Yeah.
So we say these things and they don't really mean anything, but we have to remember, that our children are much more discerning, and they're much and they're very clear of what they hear and what we say, even when we think they're not listening. So we have to respect their time to grieve. Now, when my father-in-law died, she and her grandfather were very close. Sean used to take her down every weekend to see him. They
That's
used to go for Chinese food. They, she knew about his apartment, everything. So from the time she was little enough to press the buttons. So she had a good relationship with her grandfather. In fact, we were talking about that today because she was saying that her and two of her cousins were the only two that were crying at the funeral, and some of the other grandkids were not. And I said they probably did not have the same relationship.
right.
Yeah.
But she did. She had a close relationship. And the one thing I told her, and I told her this today, I said, I regret making you go to school that day, because she had gone to see him the night before he died, or the night that he died. And she left. We left. I took her home, and he died that night. Sean stayed, and I took her home. And so the next morning, I had to tell her that he had passed on. And she was upset and she didn't want to go to school. And I said, well, you have to go to school because you're going to miss school next week. She was a mess. Within a couple of hours, she couldn't even make it. So she went to school. Her father drove her, and um, kept telling her, you have to go, you have to go. They called her. She walked in the door and she burst into tears. One of her teachers saw her, pulled her aside, and she explained that her grandfather had just died. And they said, listen, don't worry about your lessons for today. Family is everything. This is why Boston Latin Academy, shout out, is the best school in this city, because those teachers, they took care of her. They called me. I came and got her. I said, that is, of all the regrets I have, that is probably my biggest one, is making her go to school. And in fact, it was the year he died was the year that we had snowstorms every single day. She ended up not missing any school because they had to close the school because they kept having snowstorms. So it all worked out anyway. So she didn't really miss anything. But the thing is that she was allowed to grieve. And that's what I think we need to remember, that our children grieve differently from us.
Right.
They have different understanding of death, whatever our belief system is. And they're going to have pets that die. We lost our dog our dog Turner died when she was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And she was in a hospital at the time. We had to take, because we had a wedding to go to. And she was like, okay, but can we get another dog and make it younger so we'll keep her longer? So, I mean, they move on. I mean, of course,
they're resilient.
But they understand. They understand a lot more than we give them credit for. So what I would advise is be truthful with your child on about how you feel about death. Don't tell them that only old people die, because at some point they may have somebody, a classmate or someone else, or or a relative that is younger that dies. And that's what people say, only very old people die. No, that's not true. It says, what if you're God-centered, be God-centered. If you're not God-centered, be firm in what you believe. Well, say this, well, other people believe this, and even maybe say, well, this is what I choose to believe, but here are what other people believe, and you can decide what you believe. And that's the truth.
Regardless of what you believe, it's important to prepare your children for death. There are things that you should not do. And like you said, do not tell them that this person is just asleep, because
or that they just went away.
Because it was traumatizing once they found out. I have an associate, one of our show hosts, same thing. Her mother died and people did not tell her. And it's very traumatizing when you're not told what happened. So you learn not to trust people, or you get afraid if somebody leaves because you think they may not come back. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Or you tell them that their pet went to live on a farm somewhere, that kind of stuff. No, they don't.
Well, you want to be able and willing to prepare your children for things that are a part of life. Like I said, I had my friend who edited her Disney movies, and I'm thinking,
which is really ridiculous.
Teaching moment that was missed to have been able to even talk about that on a level where there is calmness and no threat, because children are afraid that their parents are going to die, and you just need to be able to explain to them, based on your belief system, how to deal with that.
Absolutely.
And we're all gonna die.
That's true.
We're
So
all going to die.
if you
None
don't
of us is
handle,
getting out of here alive.
no, nobody's gonna get out of here alive. Well, we gotta go. But well, of course, we want you all to answer the question. How did you prepare your children for someone's death? And then, of course, we're gonna have a few points to remember what not to do, regardless of your belief system, some things you absolutely should not do when it comes to helping your children prepare for the passing on of someone else. So we've got to go. It's been great. Make sure you like our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara. We are 3 Black moms.